President Trump says the administration will de-escalate in Minnesota after nice conversations with Governor Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Frey. But Frey pushed back following his meeting with border czar Tom Homan, posting in part, quote, "I also made it clear that Minneapolis does not and will not enforce federal immigration laws and that we will remain focused on keeping our neighbors and streets safe." This as Democrat lawmakers threaten to shut down the government by the end of the week over DHS funding. National Review senior writer Noah Rothman joins us now. Great to see you this morning, Noah. Thank you for joining us. So just step back, big picture here. You've talked a lot about this over the years, but I think it's important to remember what is going on here. You have federal agents in Minneapolis trying to enforce federal laws. And then you have Democrat politicians in Minneapolis and in Minnesota at large and in other places who are doing all they can to foment a situation where ICE officers are not able to carry out their constitutional responsibilities.
Absolutely. We know there are activist groups that goad well-meaning liberals into putting themselves in between armed law enforcement agents and the targets of arrest. Extremely dangerous. But we've also seen Democratic politicians like Governor Walz tell them to continue doing that, not just filming them, which is their right, but also saying that'll be used in prosecutions against ICE agents. That's the sort of thing that can go to an impressionable head. Likewise, you have dozens of Democrats falsely accusing ICE of abducting children and using them as bait. Minnesota Senator Tina Smith calling that pure evil. Again, it's the sort of thing that radicalizes. But there are also elements. I'm sorry, continue.
Yeah, no. I want to get to the politics, but I also want to ask you about this. The fact that you make a really important point about how these politicians are saying that, oh, we're going to keep these videotapes to prosecute. Obviously there are protections for federal officers working in a state or a city. But that immunity in the hands of local politicians, I'm scared for these agents.
Well, I don't know what the plan would be for local prosecutors. There are certainly prosecutors who like to make a name for themselves with these splashy campaigns. Mayor Frey's position that he's not going to be able to enforce or will not enforce federal law, at least immigration law, that seems pretty untenable, at least if we look at 2020 and his belated and welcome efforts to police those protests eventually. The activist class doesn't make this careful distinction between the enforcement of federal and state law and the enforcement of any law against them, especially in the event that they engage in unrest or unlawful activity, is going to be not especially welcome with the activist class that he's trying to ingratiate himself to. Right. But I do also have to say that there are elements in this administration that also welcome this kind of street theater. It was widely reported last year that splashy law enforcement activity is designed to deter would-be migrants from coming north, and it has had that effect, but at the expense of increased media attention and an increasingly agitated opposition. And there's a theory that conflict between activists, left-wing activists in the streets redounds to the benefit of the law and order administration. Right. I think that's a sound calculation, but it's a fraught one, increasing the risk of confrontation where everything can go wrong.
Especially because President Trump has demonstrated that he's actually trying to get things done as opposed to just make a splash. But you bring up politics, and I think it's really important. Obviously, all of this is against the backdrop of politics. Michael LaRosa, former Biden administration official, has this warning to people like Jacob Frey, who are saying that we will never cooperate. He posts on X, "This is a death for 2028 Democrats. Stay away, run away from this as fast as you can," going on to say, Obama chose tough enforcement and won re-election. Biden chose accommodation and paid a governing and political price. Bad policy is bad politics. And I'm also reminded that in Virginia, Democrats love to point to Virginia and New Jersey, the mayoral races last year. In both cases, they ran on border security. The Democrats won running on border security. Do you think that they will, in November, midterms, Democrats will embrace Jacob Frey, or will they embrace border security?
That's the big question, and the activist class is going to make it very difficult for Democrats who want to have a national profile to run on border security or be a sound steward of border security. But that admonition is pretty sound, and that's the point of Trump's tactical retreat. A tactical retreat is not abandoning the campaign; it's prosecuting the campaign under more auspicious circumstances. Trump will be, and the Democrats and Republicans rather, will be able to make the case that this is really only happening in Minneapolis and Minnesota because of the political culture that prevails in Minneapolis and Minnesota. It'll make itself. They just have to deprive Democrats of the headlines and the images that justify in their minds the kind of resistance theatrics we've been seeing.
Right. Noah Rothman, thank you so much.
So DHS has now confirmed to Fox that the federal agents who fired their weapons, there were 2 of them, according to the report, during the fatal shooting of Alex Preddy in Minneapolis, have been placed on administrative leave. We are told that is a standard procedure in the midst of an investigation and the tragic outcome of what happened at that incident. So that's the latest. They are both on leave. Now, DHS Secretary Noem is facing some calls to resign in the wake of Preddy's death. President Trump says that she is not stepping down, that he has confidence in her. She's doing a good job. Democrat Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman has made a direct appeal to the president. Quote, Americans have died. She is betraying DHS's core mission and trashing your border security legacy. He goes on to say, do not make the mistake President Biden made for not firing a grossly incompetent DHS secretary. Alejandro Mayorkas, of course, served as President Biden's DHS secretary. Senator Fetterman joins me now. Senator, always good to have you with us. Thank you for joining me. Your strong statement that you posted, can you elaborate a little bit on your thinking here and whether or not you think there will be an effort to force her resignation in Congress?
Well, here, absolutely. I mean, I think I come to this interview with like quality and quite cred. I met with her in my office. I voted for her. I was only one of 7 Democrats to vote with her. And when we discussed, I said, do you want to secure our border? And she was like, yes, absolutely. And, I want to deport all of the criminals. And she's like, absolutely. And I don't think we should be targeting otherwise lawful migrants. And I said, absolutely, then I will vote and I will support her because I am the ranking member of the subcommittee for border security. And I wanted to work with her. And I haven't made it personal. I never attacked her if I didn't have to agree with everything that's happening. So right now, when you've reached this situation here, like you see, and I don't know why at this point you kind of push this kinds of right now because Americans have died. And this isn't really seeming to be about the core things of securing our border and deporting all of the criminals now, too. At this point, that's why I said that to the president. I'm like, we had an incompetent secretary, Mayorkas, and I'm like, he should have go there. And that's the same kind of situation. And for me, it's like, I would kind of take the win about how you have secure our border. And that's really where I approach that. And now what's created in Minneapolis became an ungovernable and a dangerous urban theater. It's dangerous for citizens, dangerous for law enforcement, dangerous for agents at this point. Stand down, do a reset, refocus on those core missions that I think the vast majority of Americans can support. Secure our border, deport every last criminal migrant in the nation. For now, I absolutely fully support that, and I always have, and I actually acknowledge that it's been successful to secure our border in that way.
I think there's a lot of concern that the scene that we saw, you called it urban theater, and a tragic urban theater indeed over the last several days, that it could emerge other places, and we all hope that is absolutely not the case. But I want to play this soundbite. This is Philadelphia's DA, Larry Krasner, warning ICE agents about being hunted down. Watch this.
This is a small bunch of wannabe Nazis. That's what they are. In a country of 350 million, we outnumber them. If we have to hunt you down the way they hunted down Nazis for decades, we will find your identities, we will find you, we will achieve justice.
Is that going to get us anywhere, Senator?
Oh, that's gross, and that I absolutely condemn that. Absolutely. Do not compare anyone to Nazis. Don't use that kind of rhetoric. That can incite violence, and now I strongly reject that and condemn that kind of language in the strongest terms. Members of ICE are not Nazis. I don't compare anyone to Gestapo and those things. This is one of the reasons why I think we should stand down in what's happening in Minneapolis. We all have to reduce the temperature. We have to turn it down. And using that kinds of rhetoric, again, I can't ever support that. And I have a basic rule in politics: don't compare anyone to Nazis. I don't care. You just don't do that. These are not Nazis. So for me.
Yeah, we saw similar language from the leadership in Minneapolis and in Minnesota, and it did not help to calm things down. Let me ask you about this. There's obviously another standoff that could lead to a shutdown this weekend, and I'm curious what you think about stripping out this DHS bill. And I would just remind people that DHS is fully funded from the big, beautiful bill all the way through 2029. So rejecting this funding this weekend is not going to have any impact on funding ICE. What do you think?
Thank you for reminding.
Go
That's
ahead.
The truth. Absolutely, 1,000%. And I don't know if your viewers remember, I really led that as the Democrats, that we cannot ever shut our government down.
Yes.
Just last month, I guess it was even happening. It's always wrong to shut our government down. And now, for me, I'm a Democrat that I will never ever vote to defund our military. Absolutely not. And now, this would be the second time we would not pay our military twice in 2 months. 2 months. And for me, as you just correctly pointed out, ICE already has their funding already because of the big, beautiful bill at this point. So for me, I would love to have some modest kinds of changes and to make the ICE process better, safer for everybody. And I want to just, focus on deport every criminal migrant in the nation and secure our border, because, our party, we failed at the border, and it was a disaster during the Biden administration. So for me, that's what I want. But for me, shutting the government down and pushing our military and not go without a paycheck for like 45 days that we had to do, I can't support that. But I do hope we're able to just focus on the DH1, and we can have a bipartisan conversation to make some of the kinds of the appropriate and refocus what the true mission about ICE should be in that. And I'm also one of the Democrats. All of the abolish ICE and all that nonsense, that's absurd. It does have a necessary function, and we should just focus on the thing most Americans can: secure the border, round up and deport every criminal migrants here that are in our nation.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
It sounds like that the president wants that to be the focus at this point as well, especially after what we just saw happen over the course of the last week. Senator Fetterman, we'll see if the other Democrats are in line with you and the government stays open, coming down to a deadline over the weekend. Thank you very much, Senator Fetterman. Good to see you as always.
Thanks for having me on.
Founder and CEO of the Freedom Foundation of Minnesota, Annette Meeks, joins me now. Annette, thank you so much for joining us. A lot has happened in Minneapolis since this weekend. So how do you view where things stand today?
Well, not much different is the sad and sorry truth. The protesters are still in the streets, and many of the downtown hotels have had to lock their doors. So in order to gain entrance, guests have to show keys and ID. The protesters, like I said, are still out. Yesterday, they stormed the governor's office. That was the video you just had there. Kids are not in school, and now they're calling for another day of action. It's not what our city needs. Our city needs to return to normal, and unfortunately, we're going in just the opposite direction.
Yeah, well, President Trump is hoping to change that because safety has always been his goal, and to see 2 Americans shot and law enforcement under attack constantly, clearly something needs to change. And that often starts with conversation. So here's President Trump on his phone call with Governor Walz yesterday. Listen to this.
It couldn't have been a nicer conversation. And in fact, I said to my people, I said, It's hard to believe that's the same guy I watch on television or I watch in a debate not doing so well, or because we had a very reasonable conversation, very good conversation. If you believe the conversation, he'd like to get this thing over with.
So it really did seem like both sides are coming together, and that may ultimately be what happens, striking some sort of deal. But then we have this from Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey yesterday, who wrote on Xnet, "I also made it clear that Minneapolis does not and will not enforce federal immigration laws." He's talking about his conversation with Tom Homan, and that we will remain focused on keeping our neighbors and streets safe. City leaders will continue to stay in conversation with Mr. Homan and his team. But when he talks about not enforcing federal immigration laws, I mean, to have an elected official say something like that, what do you think he means by that?
Oh, I think he means what he says. They have not worked with the feds ever. They believe they're a sanctuary city and that somehow or other they are above or beyond the federal laws. They're not. And that's part of what's led to the confrontations you've seen. They lead a gang of people that has increasingly turned more and more scary and violent, and into believing that you don't have to obey federal law enforcement officials, and you do. The laws of our United States government do apply, whether you're in Minneapolis, St. Paul, or Memphis. It doesn't matter. And as long as their leaders continue to say horrible things like that, that lead these people to take to the streets and commit crimes, the longer this will persist.
Annette, I have a note from you that says before Trump was elected, they quietly deported 670 people from Minneapolis and no one protested. Can you give us the details about that?
Well, it is quite amazing, isn't it, that for the last 4 years, prior to President Trump being sworn in last January, 6,700 people were deported from Minnesota by the federal government, whether it was Border Patrol or ICE. It doesn't matter. They were safely taken out of the state, returned to where they belong, and now they will have their due process day in court. No one said a word. Nothing happened until recently. And the only thing that changed was President Trump said, we are going to enforce the laws of our country. We are going to enforce our borders. We are going to make sure people are safe. And once he said that, that seemed to ignite the direct action people into working against our federal government. Federal government is not our enemy. They're the ones trying to keep us safe here in our homes and in our businesses. And for some reason, Mayor Frey and Governor Walz declared war against them.
Yeah, that and having all those people deported and have nobody protest would indicate that this is, political as opposed to ideological or having some sort of moral feeling towards the issue. So, Annette, really quickly before we let you go, how do you think this ends? What sort of resolution will both sides come to?
Well, President Trump has proved to be the bigger man and certainly the person more concerned about public safety and making sure our cities can return to normal. And I applaud him for that. And I really hope that he's able and that Mr. Homan can bring these conversations to fruition and bring a peaceful settlement and send these people back to jobs, back to their homes, get the kids back in school and return to normal. This is doing historic damage to our city that we had barely recovered from the George Floyd riot 6 years ago. We can't afford this as a city, and so we need President Trump's leadership here to bring this home.
Annette Meeks, founder and CEO of the Freedom Foundation of Minnesota, we thank you so much for your thoughts and your time this morning.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Will Cain Show. We're going to do something a little bit different today. While the entire nation loses its mind over Minneapolis, Minnesota, and descends into rhetoric that sounds like a civil war, we want to step back and we want to answer a very important question. What is happening? What is happening today in Minneapolis? And more importantly, what is happening when it comes to illegal immigration? Let's start with today. What's happening in Minneapolis? Some are calling President Trump's offer for de-escalation surrender, a complete pullback. Many are concerned about that on the right. Others say no, nothing has changed. In fact, DHS has sent in new reinforcements to Minneapolis. So, has this thaw simply been rhetorical? Has any policy changed on the streets of Minnesota? We do know this. The 2 CBP officers who fired their weapons during the Alex Preddy shooting have been placed on administrative leave. So, Is it pedal to the metal, or has there been a de-escalation? Is there a change in policy, or has this all been a calmer diplomacy? Here's the president yesterday.
We have Tom Homan there now. We put him in there. He's great. And they met with the governor, the mayor, everybody else, and we're going to de-escalate a little bit. But I will tell you, you look at the numbers, they're doing better than they've done in many years because we took thousands of criminals out of Minnesota.
Let's get, though, together to the bigger, more important, real conversation. What's really happening on illegal immigration? What is this fight about? According to the left, this is about stopping Nazis, an authoritarian regime. This is about love. No. We know what this is about. This is about power. And more to the point, Democrats' desperate play to cling to power. If it weren't about power, then a very reasonable offer stands on the table from the White House. In fact, just published yesterday from the White House, this is what they offered to Democrats. The Trump administration wrote these 4 points. 1, turn over all incarcerated or active warrant criminal illegal aliens for immediate deportation. 2, transfer all criminal illegal aliens arrested by state and local police. 3, assist federal authorities in detaining criminal illegal aliens wanted for crimes. And 4, Democrats must work with the federal government in the rapid removal of all criminal illegal aliens. Reasonable, straightforward, easy. An easy yes, one would think, because everyone gives lip service to deporting criminal illegal aliens. So why not accept the offer, Democrats? Well, the response came, of course, from Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. He wrote, I made it clear that Minneapolis does not and will not enforce federal immigration laws. Well, that message from Frey got back to the president, who wrote on Truth Social. Could somebody in his inner sanctum please explain that this statement is a very serious violation of the law and that he is playing with fire? But Frey is not afraid of being burned. He posted a picture of what the president posted and wrote, the job of our police is to keep people safe, not to enforce federal immigration laws. But you see, no one is asking Minneapolis police to enforce immigration laws. Instead, what they have been asked to do is honor ICE detainers, something done by literally dozens of other states in the United States of America. That allows it so that illegal immigrants charged with crimes can be turned over from city and county jails. But see, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota reveals that this is about something much bigger. All of this drama, everything you see playing out on the streets of Minneapolis and St. Paul, that's about the ever-elusive immigration reform.
These folks that are out there on the streets, they're very skeptical, and rightfully so. So the mood is, there's a hint of hope and optimism, but there is a resolve that says, you know, the end of this is not Greg Bovino leaving. The end of this is a sane policy on how you do immigration reform and stop an attack by the federal government on a state.
A sane policy on immigration reform like the ones that have already been elected by the people of the United States, ones voted on by a majority, ones already passed through the democratic process? No, this sounds like, Governor, a change. Immigration reform through the violence of a mob. This sounds like taking the American people hostage to change policies to the will of certain Democrats. And also, buried in that cut, if you didn't hear it, Walz intentionally conflates prison with jail. You see, prisons already work with ICE, but that's not the full story. And this was called out by Fox News correspondent Bill Malugin. He wrote on X, very misleading from Walz. Yes, his prisons honor ICE detainers by transferring convicted criminal aliens after they serve their sentence. But his city and county jails do not. ICE wants criminal aliens arrested for crimes handed to them instead of released to the streets. You see, and most states do this. They transfer from prisons, of course, and most as well, like Texas or Florida or Nevada, hand over criminals from jail. The fight with sanctuary jurisdictions is over ICE detainers ignored at city and county jails for people who have already been arrested, not yet, convicted. All right, now let's continue to dive into this. It's an important policy point with Fox News correspondent Bill Maloogian. Bill, you were all over this, and that is great. It's wordplay, and it is misleading. But inside of this subterfuge is actually the issue, right, when it comes to sanctuary cities.
Yeah, you're spot on. I think one of the biggest misnomers is when people talk about ICE detainers, you see a lot of these blue city mayors or blue state governors talking about prisons. To your point, almost every state out there cooperates with ICE when it comes to prisons, even sanctuary states. California, for example, California Department of Corrections very often hands convicted criminals over to ICE. To your point, the fight over sanctuary policy is largely in city and county jails, local jails. Just to give you an example, say an illegal immigrant is arrested for assault with a deadly weapon and he gets booked into the Los Angeles County Jail. ICE will place a detainer on that person with the Los Angeles County Jail and say, hey, before you guys release him, will you please give us a heads up and let us know so we can go pick him up? And because of California's sanctuary state policies, SB 54, or Minnesota's sanctuary state policies, the locals don't give ICE a heads up, and ICE doesn't know when they're released. Sometimes they're able to find out on their own if they just place agents at the front of the jail and they go pick them up. But for the most part, what ICE is asking of these sanctuary jurisdictions is simply, if you're going to let these people out of your jail, if they're going to bond out, let us know. We're not asking you to go arrest them or help us find them. Just let us know. We'll take them off your hands because we consider them to be a public safety threat. But over and over, how many times, Will, have we done stories here on Fox News that we hear an ICE detainer was ignored and then this person goes and commits a new heinous crime?
Yes. Now, I want to dive in together as well, Bill. You're well versed on this, on the other aspect of what Waltz has to say. He reveals with the Bulwark that what he's looking for is immigration reform. There are reports that Democrats want to require ICE to get a judicial warrant before detaining an illegal immigrant. You wrote about this. We'll go back to what you posted. If reports are true that Democrats are demanding judicial warrants for all ICE arrests as part of this new DHS funding bill, that will take a massive amount of targets off the board for ICE. Bill, many are looking at this requirement for a judicial warrant, one that is not required of immigration enforcement today, and calling it essentially backdoor amnesty.
Yeah, so Politico is reporting that one of the demands Democrats are making right now, as you mentioned, is they want judicial warrants for ICE arrests. And that would essentially cripple any hopes of a mass deportation agenda. The way it works right now is ICE uses administrative warrants, civil warrants. All they need is probable cause or reasonable suspicion that somebody is in the U.S. illegally and they are amenable to the Immigration and Nationality Act, and they can arrest and deport them. If you require a judicial warrant for every single arrest, that means that that person would have to commit a new federal crime after entering the country illegally. And you would then have to go to a federal judge or a federal magistrate to get probable cause to sign off on a warrant that a new federal crime was committed. And what's important is the feds don't enforce local or state laws, right? So if somebody gets arrested for child rape or attempted murder, if you need a judicial warrant, those aren't federal crimes. Those are crimes that are committed at the state and local level.
So if you're
going to say ICE has to go get a judicial warrant, it has to be some sort of new federal felony to go pick them up.
Right. So what you're explaining to us very, very lucidly is that you would not have the capability of deporting anyone unless they committed exclusively a federal crime. That would be the effect of a push for judicial warrants. Bill, incredibly educating. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thanks, Will.
I do want to keep driving forward on this, okay, because we have to answer the question, what is this really about on illegal immigration? Well, Jay, if you listen to the left and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, this is all about everything that you're seeing on the streets. It's about love.
I think it's important to tell the whole country that this is not just about resistance here in Minneapolis. It's about love. We are showing something far more powerful and consequential here, which is love.
All right, love, yes. Let's take that invitation up, because this is not the first time we've heard that, Mayor. We've heard that as well across the world, whether or not it's real or it's fake, the idea that you're the compassionate one seeking love. We saw this play out in Sweden. Okay, how did it work in Sweden? In 2015, at the height of the European refugee crisis, Sweden topped the list of countries who took in asylum seekers. All right, politicians preached compassion, and what happened is their citizens opened their homes. By 2024, 20% of the population in Sweden was foreign-born. Keep following me. Because it wasn't just those who are foreign-born. It's those people having children. Children who were born in Sweden but to two foreign-born parents. That population doubled in 20 years. But here's the problem with your compassion and love. It knows no bounds. It's unconditional. The system, unfortunately, is conditional. And it breaks. It breaks when it's put under tension of scale. Housing, integration, unemployment, criminal activity, all impacted in Sweden. And the social contract of one of the countries in the world that was often described as the happiest broke. The social contract destroyed. By 2025, Sweden reverses course. They're rewriting policy to discourage asylum seekers, to reduce migration. It's an uncomfortable truth. Compassion without capacity collapses. And in this case, collapses a nation. Take a look at the headline about Sweden. Sweden wants to pay refugees $37,000 to go home. This reflects the radical transformation in the Scandinavian country once open attitude toward newcomers. Incentivize. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. We've seen self-deportation here in America. But whether or not it's self-deportation or mass deportation, President Trump pointed out to me yesterday, this is hard, much harder than inflation. Getting illegals out of America is hard.
Inflation, I can solve. All this stuff. The hardest thing to solve is when you have people brought into the country and you have to take those people. We have a very unfriendly court system, frankly, especially at the lower levels. Take those people and you have to say, I'm sorry, but you're going out. And in many cases, they're murderers. And, you know, they shoot you. They kill you. You've seen that, where they kill you. You're after a murderer. Sir, you're going to have to come with me. And they end up shooting you. It's a very tough job that they have.
Well, everyone can see that, even if you're a Democrat. You can see crime on the streets. You can learn the lesson of Sweden and Europe. So why would Democrats push down this same path? And the answer is quite obvious, answering our big question of the day. It is self-preservation. The party does not want to lose on this issue because it means losing votes. Take a look at the 2030 forecast for the census. It predicts states like Texas and Florida gaining seats, while states like California, Minnesota, and New York losing seats. That means President Trump, with this map, would have smoked Kamala Harris without the Rust Belt, without the blue wall. It means Democrats are in real trouble of winning future elections.
They want to have a bunch of illegal immigrants in this country because it helps them protect the structure. They don't want to lose electoral votes. Well, if people are moving out of their states, what's the way they can increase their population? Import people. This is why they're fighting us enforcing our immigration laws so aggressively, because it is existential for them in many ways.
Which is also why they won't turn over voter rolls, as Attorney General Pam Bondi is asking Governor Walz to do. Allow the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice to access voter rolls to confirm that Minnesota's voter registration practices comply with federal law, as authorized by the Civil Rights Act of 1960s. But from that request, a new talking point was born.
Give us your voter rolls. Really? This was never about public safety. This is all about rigging the election.
Donald Trump has made it clear that he intends to try to interfere in the upcoming 2026 election.
They're authoritarians and they're trying to take over this country, and they no longer think we need elections.
What is happening? The preservation of power. What is happening? The preservation of power. Let's see if I got it wrong. Vermont Democrat Senator Peter Welch joins me now. Senator, thanks for being with us here today. I have a very direct and simple question for you here today that I'd love us to be able to answer. Why do Democrats seem to be so hell-bent on keeping criminal illegal aliens from being handed over to ICE?
We're absolutely not. I mean, Vermont, we're not a sanctuary state, as you call it. Two things. Number one, the border has to be secure. We made great progress on that. Number two, criminals should be deported. What the problem here is that the killings, we had 2 killings of really innocent people. and then a denial by Kristi Noem that there was any responsibility on the part of bad training.
Really quick, Senator, because we don't disagree on this point. I do not disagree that a tragic incident, happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The question is how we arrive at this moment of tragedy. You say that in Vermont, you hand over criminal illegal aliens to ICE and to DHS to the federal government. But that is not happening in Minnesota. That is not happening with Mayor Jacob Frey. That is not happening with Governor Tim Walz. They are sanctuary jurisdictions who deny that ability to ICE. And then we start the dominoes falling, Senator. Then ICE has to go in with a team. Then they have to find the illegal criminal alien. Then you have your protesters who get in their way and impede the operation. Then you get these tense situations.
Let me have a chance to weigh in here.
Please.
The bottom line here is that good law enforcement depends on trust and trust within the community. It also depends on cooperation. And when I talk to Vermont law enforcement, they're appalled. And they ask questions about what was the training of ICE? Why are they picking up people just because of their accent or because of the color of their skin?
No.
It erodes that
but you just said that's not happening.
That you need.
You just said it's not happening in Vermont. I can tell you that's not happening in Texas. That's not happening in Texas because they turn them over to ICE.
Noem has to answer some questions. How is it that her people were so poorly trained that when a man who was on the ground and totally under control was shot 10 times by 2 agents?
Senator,
that's a serious issue. And the folks who are in charge of law enforcement more than anyone else should be getting to the bottom of this.
I could litigate the details of what happened with Alex Preddy. I could litigate the details with you.
Thank you.
And they have been litigated, okay? And I imagine at the end of that litigation, you and I are still going to disagree. We could look at the same video and see 2 different things. I wish you would see it through the lens of the humanity, not just of Alex Preddy, but of the officers that day who are dealing with very tense situation. What I'm talking about with you as a policymaker here today is why does that tense situation exist? Why are Democrats fighting to not turn over criminals to ICE?
That's not what we're doing. I really dispute that. I mean, you laid out a situation where I disagree with your premise. The bottom line here, let me just say this very clearly. We need a secure border. Democrats understand that. We should be deporting criminals. And we do. And President Trump, I'll give him credit for that. And a lot of the folks that you talked about with this argument that it's a political change or that we're trying to hold on to power, that's totally bogus. Because in fact, a lot of Hispanics were very much opposed to what they saw as open borders. That has been changed. Now what we're having is a reaction to the overly aggressive, dangerous tactics that ICE is using, and that's a function of training. And for me, it's all summed up. Let me just finish with this. It's all summed up when Kristi Noem, without any information whatsoever, says that these are domestic terrorists. A 37-year-old ICU nurse and a 37-year-old mom of 3. That is just unconscionable.
I believe that Secretary Noem was wrong to come out and describe Renee Good as a domestic terrorist in the moments after that incident. However, I think this entire thing could be solved like that if Minnesota or California would behave the way that every other rational state behaves and doesn't defy the supremacy clause of the United States Constitution and says what you said here today, put your actions behind your words, that you're willing to turn over criminals to the federal government. We can solve it like that.
You've got a point, all right? But that requires cooperation, and cooperation requires trust. In having this massive influx of agents, this is where I think the president made a good gesture yesterday, where he says, let's tone it down a little bit, let's withdraw. That's a strategic decision that can help calm the situation, so you may be able to get to a level of cooperation that generally we've had between local law enforcement and federal law enforcement.
Right.
Yeah, that's really essential, but trust is part of it. And that's where the leadership of ICE has just gone nuts, really.
Well, Senator, I want to say to you, I appreciate you sitting and listening to what I believe is the answer to why this is all happening, and I do appreciate hearing from an alternative point of view and your time here today. Senator Welch, thank you.
Political tensions boiling over at a Minneapolis town hall featuring Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, a member of the audience jumping out of his front row seat, spraying Omar with some kind of liquid before he was tackled by security. And welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Dana Perino.
Morning to you. Wednesday, hump day, here we go. I'm Bill Hemmer. Second hour begins now. The frightening incident occurring last evening as the Congresswoman was speaking against ICE, calling for the resignation and impeachment of Kristi Noem. Here is what happened at that scene.
DHS Secretary Kristi Noem must resign or face impeachment. I don't know.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. He sprayed something on her.
I need a napkin to know nothing.
And Chief Congressional Correspondent Chad Pergram has more. What do we know this morning, Chad?
Good morning, Dana. This was mayhem. Omar had just called for abolishing ICE when the man rushed the podium.
I don't know.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
No, we'll go. No, we will continue.
No.
Cops busted 55-year-old Anthony James Kamerchik. He's charged with third-degree assault. Omar's aides begged her to suspend the meeting, but Omar insisted on continuing.
Please don't let them have the show. Here is the reality that people like this ugly man don't understand. We are Minnesota strong, and we will stay resilient in the face of whatever they might throw at us.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries defended Omar.
This should have never happened. I'm thankful that she is physically okay. She's mentally strong, as is always the case, and we stand by her.
Now, the attack came hours after President Trump called out Omar. He's raised questions about how the native of Somalia and her husband made millions while she's been in office.
They have to be proud, not like Ilhan Omar. She comes from a country that's a disaster. So probably it's considered, I think, the worst. It's not even a country.
Now, Omar contends she's done nothing wrong. The Capitol Police just released its report on threats against lawmakers. There were nearly 15,000 threats last year. That's up a staggering 57%. Dana?
All right, Chad Pergram.
Welcome back. Senate Democrats are being urged to, quote, play hardball against ICE and use a government shutdown as leverage to reform the agency. That, at least according to a new memo reportedly floating around on Capitol Hill. With me now to talk all about it is Michael LaRosa, former chief spokesperson of First Lady Jill Biden and special assistant to President Biden, as well as Kaylee McGee-White, Fox News contributor and Steamboat Institute fellow. Kaylee and Michael, great to see you both. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having us.
So we'll start off talking about Mayor Frey in Minneapolis. President Trump put out a Truth Social this morning after that phone call he had with him. Said, quote, surprisingly, Mayor Jacob Frey just stated that Minneapolis does not and will not enforce federal immigration laws. This is after having had a very good conversation with him. Could somebody in his inner sanctum please explain that this statement is a very serious violation of the law and that he is playing with fire? Well, Mayor Frey then tweeted out again today that kind of doubled down, said we will not cooperate with ICE. Michael, I know you got some thoughts on this. You tweeted yesterday that this is just a really bad idea, really bad messaging from Democrats. Give us your thoughts.
Well, I don't think Democrats as a whole, a party, wants to be seen, viewed, perceived as a party that will not follow the law, that will not follow. I mean, does that make it okay to not pay taxes? Where do you cross the line? And this statement is so irresponsible that it is going to hurt Democrats who feel like, you know, public safety is important and that enforcement is important. We can do both. We can have enforcement and we can welcome immigrants to this country. Barack Obama did it. Barack Obama was very tough on enforcement with his ICE raids. In fact, the ACLU called it a mockery of the Fourth Amendment. But we didn't see this backlash to law enforcement the way we're seeing now. And Democrats need to change their rhetoric because it will hurt us in the long run, as it did President Biden.
And speaking of that rhetoric, Kaylee, do you think Democrats at some point have kind of just talked themselves into a corner here? Every day they're calling ICE the Gestapo and Nazis. So if they were ever going to cooperate with them, is their base going to say, well, how could you cooperate with Nazis?
Well, that, and I think that what's changed is that political viability is now on the line, because as much as Democrats might not want to be seen as the party that opposes law and order, they much would rather remain politically viable. And the fact is that if deportations continue, if the border remains shut down, then Democrats are going to be in a very hard position come the 2030 census. Their political viability very much so depends on juicing those census numbers in blue states, which they've been able to to do with mass illegal immigration.
Philly DA Larry Krasner has a few thoughts on ICE as well. Let's take a listen to that. Get your thoughts on the other side.
If we have to hunt you down the way they hunted down Nazis for decades, we will find your identities, we will find you, we will achieve justice, and we will do so under the Constitution and the laws of the United States.
Michael, yet another Nazi comparison.
The language is sick. It's really that kind of language that is contributing to what brings us here today. You know, he's a law enforcement official. I'm embarrassed to be from Pennsylvania because he's doing things like that. This is not a moral proxy war. We can be for the rule of law. We can be for the law, enforcing the laws as they are written. And you know what? If people don't like it, it's the policymakers who made the laws that we're still operating under. It's a 1986 law. That's why it does take legislative and executive cooperation in order to change the law. But the ICE agents are just following the laws on the books. So maybe everybody should be directing their anger at the people who write and can change the laws.
Kaylee, got about 30 seconds left here. Want to get your thoughts. Who's going to get the blame if we have a partial government shutdown? Democrats say it's going to be Senate Republicans. They're in the majority. Republicans say, well, you guys are the ones who are messing with the DHS bill. Who's it going to fall on?
It'll be the Democrats. They'll have to own it, just like they have to own the consequences of the last one. They're saying they're doing this over ICE, but as we discussed earlier, ICE is already funded through 2029. Yeah. So they're going to be affecting TSA, they're going to be affecting FEMA, and more importantly, the hardworking Americans who depend on those government agencies on a daily basis.
Michael, final thoughts. Chuck Schumer says we need to, quote, rein in ICE. Final thoughts.
Agree. It shouldn't be a choice between defund or reforming. We can all agree that there needs to be some reasonable reform.
All right, got to leave it there. Michael LaRosa, Kaylee McGee-White, great to see you guys. Get that roof fixed.
Contributor Reince Priebus and Republican strategist Aaron McGuire. Aaron, start with you. Where does this go from here? Because I don't believe Tim Walz and I don't believe, Mayor Smallfry that they're going to really cooperate in the end. I think they will, revert to form.
I hope where we go from here is with President Trump's leadership. He's shown that when he steps in and takes the lead, that cooler heads do prevail and that an adult enters the room. But this has been Democrats' playbook for years. They use this inflamed rhetoric. You have seen it from Maxine Waters, from Chuck Schumer. Get in their faces, get aggressive. This is not anything new. And then they use hypocrisy by claiming that we need to that you need to continue this, that somehow they become the victim in all of this. But this is where Donald Trump and Republicans come in and they provide facts and common sense, and that's where this needs to go from here, because facts and common sense would show you that if you allow state and local law enforcement to work with federal officials to get criminals off the streets, common sense will tell you that everybody, every part of your community is safer and better for that. And with President Trump, that's the goal they're going for right now.
In spite, Reince Priebus, what Tim Walz says, we want them out of here as soon as possible. Well, Donald Trump and ICE are making his state more safe and secure. Why is he so reluctant to follow the Constitution, the Supremacy Clause, and allow law enforcement, federal law enforcement, to enforce federal laws? It is their jurisdiction. It's not the state's jurisdiction.
Well, because they're driven by something else here, and you hit on it. You got all those clips from all these horrific things that these people are saying, supposed comedians on TV, podcasters. It's because these people play and use division like an athlete plays to win. And where does it start? It starts, number one, with, you said it before, lawlessness, okay? Number one. 12 million people over the border. Number two, more lawlessness. We're going to have a sanctuary city. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means we're going to enforce some laws and not others, okay? So now we have rebellion division now moving into the cities and the states, confronting the federal government. Then the third thing, these protests, while there are people that are protesting peacefully, and I'm sure they're good citizens and all that, but there are 501c3s and 527s that are using this opportunity to make money because division is profit. And so what do? They gin people up. They've got paid people. They're doing podcasts. They're doing video clips. And what are these clips? It's all division. It's all to make money. It is a grift to a certain extent that just starts bubbling bubbling up from the bottom. And then Tim Walz and Frey and these guys, they're answering to this grift, to this ecosystem of rebellion that's also funded by a lot of people to create all of this, to number one, sow division, but number two, to make money. They're making a profit from not solving problems, and they're getting clicks for it. That's part of what's going on here in this country.
Am I right or wrong? Exit question, yes or no. Will Tim Walz revert to form, Aaron, and ultimately just capitulate to the radical base that he feels he needs to appeal to?
I certainly hope not, but I believe he will, because he's shown time and again what a spineless leader he can be. I really hope he can meet this moment, but it seems unlikely.
Reince.
I think he'll cut a deal on the prisoners, and I think President Trump will show real leadership, as Aaron mentioned before, and President Trump will lead to diffuse this issue, as he's already started to do. Even though he doesn't have to, he will.
Reince, Aaron, good to see you both.
Meanwhile, all of this coming as Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar was approached by a man and sprayed with an unknown liquid during a town hall meeting last night.
Chief Congressional Correspondent Chad Pergram joins us now from Capitol Hill with the latest. Hey, Chad.
Guys, good morning. Mayhem in Minneapolis. Democratic Minnesota Representative Ilhan Omar met with her constituents after the killing of Alex Pretty by ICE, and then a man lunged at her as she criticized ICE.
DHS Secretary Kristi Noem must resign or face impeachment. I don't know.
Oh my God! Oh my God! He sprayed something on her.
I need a napkin to know nothing. No, we'll go. No, we will continue.
No. Ilhan, you need to go get checked.
No, we will continue. I'm not going to get away with it.
Police arrested 55-year-old Anthony James Kamerchik. They charged him with third-degree assault. He sprayed Omar with a smelly brown liquid from a syringe. Omar insisted that she continue the meeting.
Please don't let them have it. Here is the reality that people like this ugly man don't understand. We are Minnesota strong, and we will stay resilient in the face of whatever they might throw at us.
U.S. Capitol Police say the suspect will meet swift justice. Capitol Police just released stats on threat investigations involving lawmakers. The department probed nearly 15,000 threats last year. That's up 57%. There were 9,400 threats in 2024. Many Democrats called for defunding the police after the killing of George Floyd in 2020. Omar says that has changed.
You know, I will say one thing that ICE has succeeded in doing is make Minneapolis residents love Minneapolis police. and have, I mean, I say that with the utmost respect. You know, that's the only thing that they have succeeded in doing.
Now the attack comes amid an investigation into Omar's finances. Questions linger about how she and her husband made tens of millions of dollars after she took office in 2019. Guys, back to you.
Some real questions there.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Politics is not supposed to be a business where you go and make a fortune. But for some people, apparently it is.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.